Hello everyone, I hope you guys are having a great day. For today's video, I am going to go over my round 6 at US Team Amateurs 2024. For your information, I will put the link to the tournament description as well as the time format in the description down below. So the pairing cycle for our team in this tournament was rather ridiculous, where we either face a very weak team or a very strong team. A very clear cut. And the same kind of go for this round, where the opponent's team have two 2000s, which is actually not too bad. However, they have two very strong 1700 and 1800. As this is the last round, I honestly wasn't thinking much anymore. I just want to have a quick game and go home and kind of enjoy the night. And in order to do that, I guess a draw will be the quickest. My opponent is 2080, so I have a good chance to do that here. So let's get started. So my opponent start with e4. Responded with c5. Going for the Sicilian. Probably one of the strongest opening that I have prepared for black. And we have knight f3. e6. Going for a sort of a Taimanov or Khan variation. And here we face g3. This is probably the first time I've faced Fianchetto, anti-Sicilian, over the board. And I have to say that after the game, I really despise this variation. It is not better for white. And in fact, after this game, I've studied this variation so I don't have to think about it again. However, during the game, I was struggling to come up with a plan against this. But intuitive says that, okay, just develop playing the Taimanov, right? 6, bishop g2, and here already I made the first mistake with g6. I didn't trust my instinct and instead go for a different variation, which is this move, and which I thought it was correct. But the thing is, what I've always played before in Blitz was much better. In Blitz, I probably would just go a6. And then I'll be fine. Like, it doesn't matter if we just go here, capture, it doesn't matter. Or actually, I can even just go d5 here. This is kind of the whole point of playing this. Or I can't even play knight f6. But I didn't do any of that, and instead I played g6. And I don't know. The main downside of this, as you see, is that my dark squares are really, really weak. So white exploded it right away with d4. And now pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, and now my dark square looks very funny. Especially d square, because I am about to Fianchetto, and these three square are not good. And here I made this move, which is actually a blunder. And honestly, the only excuse I could come up with is that I was a little bit tired and I wanted to play quickly. So I played this probably right away. And in fact, when I was annotating this game, when I look at this move, I was like, yeah, this is really bad. I would never want to play that move ever. And the reason is because of knight b5. After knight b5, I'm just kind of dead lost. Because knight b5, bishop b7, knight d6, king f8. And I wouldn't play this. I'll probably just resign because I wouldn't play with a king on f8. And my position is just frozen in the middle of the board on move 8. So, however, I was playing a little bit confidently, I would say. And so I didn't show my nervousness when I was making this move. So my opponent instead castle. And here knight b5 actually still works. But the thing is, at least I played bishop g7. So it's not really proposing the threat anymore due to me being able to castle now. Say knight b5, I castle knight d6. Sure, there's a knight sitting on d6. But there are definitely things that I can do. And it's definitely better than the previous position. However, after bishop e3, which when I end the game, I thought a knight b5 is always works. So I just actually didn't play. So I just played a6, stopping b5. And here I didn't see that d5 was a move, so I could have played this. And if takes, I'm actually fine. Like, because my queen and my knight actually protects this, and if c4 comes in, yeah, it's okay. It's not. It's actually fine for black. But here after a6, you see now my dark square are getting even weaker. So, which turns out to be another mistake. And my opponent seems to know theory here, so she play c4. So when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I mean, there's not much I can do anymore. And this is why I had to play d5 on a previous move, because c4, when c4 is play, I can no longer play d5. So a6, c4, castle, and knight c3, queen c7, and at this point, white is just straight up better, and I have a very weird setup with a pawn on g6 and e6, and my dark square are very, very vulnerable. Like, I mean, there are holes like everywhere in my position. So I started to pray in my mind that I wouldn't have to suffer again, just like my round 4 game. My opponent seems to have a pretty comfortable position, so she was playing rather quickly. 3, b6, just trying to fiend kettle the bishop, because playing d6, bishop d7 it's just not good. So rook c1, bishop b7, and here knight a4, and here I was like, yeah, I probably would lose this pawn, but I'm gonna take a bet. And when I played rook a d8, my plan was to go knight c8 without disconnecting the rooks. And here, the best move, I think the best move is just queen c2, something like this. But she went for knight b5, which is still good for white positionally. I actually was calculating this move because this is a very like typical idea in Sicilian where white temporarily sacrifice a knight in order to open up the c file, and then eventually get the knight back on c6. Knight b5 or knight d5 are very common ideas in the e6 a6 Sicilian structure. So usually this would work. I mean, it actually would work. However, in my particular position, it doesn't, as I don't have a bishop on e7. So, meaning that I am not forced to take the knight. However, I still took it, and I'll tell you why. So after takes, c takes, knight c8, and now I'm actually defending everything. Although white is still much better here positionally, this is like around +1 for white still. But hey, at least I'm not losing any material. So here I'm going to play f4. At first glance, this move seems really good and logical as well. However, it is one of the only moves that threw away all of the advantage, and you will see what I mean in the next few moves. So queen b8, forcing the pawn to take the knight, and you'll see why right away. So d takes c6, b takes c6, pawn takes c6. You have to take with the pawn because of a tempo. Now it seems that taking with the bishop makes sense. However, my pawn becomes really, really weak, and with this position, I cannot play d5 because my bishop will be hanging. So playing b takes c6 allows me to at least still have 2 pawns to play on the queen side. And this move is only possible because she played f4, allowing me to take with tempo on the queen. So here, queen c2. Now, let's go back to the position I just talked about, right? So here, f4, had white play queen c2 here, which was the best move I engined, and I also saw it. I was like, yeah, she probably will need to play queen c2. It will be a lot harder for me because if I do the same, right, after pawn takes, I have to take with the bishop because now if I take with the pawn, I don't have a tempo to attack the queen anymore. So just knight takes b6, and now he's down a pawn. So bishop takes c6, rook fd1, and I still have the weakness here, and white is just much better. So here after queen c2, now my pawns are kind of connected together, and here I made a pretty good move, a really good move that I probably wouldn't see it in a regular rapid game, but I was happy when I saw it. So I went bishop d4, and it does a couple of things. First of all, it protects my b6 pawn because I didn't want to play c5 right away. And the second reason is I also didn't want white to play e5 and blocking my dark square bishop. If you look at this position, I think the point of f4, right? Now, if white plays e5, now my bishop looks very silly. It would take me too long to remaneuver the bishop to this diagonal. So after bishop d, I'm also looking to trade on this very strong bishop on e3, right? And now, with the dark square bishop being traded, I actually don't care if my dark square are being weakened because there are actually a lot of ways for me to play here. So bishop takes e4, rook takes e4, and e5. See, now I don't have the bishop. I'm fine allowing this connect 4 structure and opening the light square bishop. So c5, and then rook fd1, rook fd8, rook takes e4, rook takes e4, rook d1. And so here I took, right? So here I know that if I just trade everything, I know it's a draw. So I played rather quickly, but I actually didn't know here that I was actually better. In fact, this position is -1, but I was already pretty tired, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to calculate more because at this point I was like, oh, I get a draw now, so now I'm just gonna play for a draw. I don't really care. And in fact, I could have reactivated my pieces and win the game. So 7, which I should put this as a pretty great move. I didn't even consider this move because this will be hanging, but in fact it is not hanging because if knight takes b6, bishop takes g2, knight d7, I think knight d7, then there's not queen b7. What is it again? Knight b7, I think queen a7. Queen a7 is fine. Queen c8 is fine. Also queen a8 is also fine. I think so. So, but here's the line, right? So if white takes the pawn, and white will probably lose when white lose a piece. Here's a main critical line. Rook takes e4, c takes e4, knight takes b6 here, bishop takes b2, knight d7, and the brilliant move d3. And I mean, after this move, I was like, yeah, it's fair. I don't play this. I don't play this line because it would take too much to calculate. I probably wouldn't be able to calculate it out anyways. And the point of this move is that it deflects the queen. So if you take this, right, then queen a7 picks up the knight. Like this. And if queen takes, then queen b7 just wins the game because the queen actually protects the bishop. So now knight c5, queen c8, attacking the knight, right? And now after b4, bishop d5, black successfully retreats with an extra piece. And in this position, I can definitely win. Although it would take some skills to try to win this because it's a bishop for 2 pawns. So, but yeah, I took. And then queen takes c1, bishop takes c2, and this is now a complete draw. And I have to tell you this. The reaction of my opponent and her board too, like next to me, was hilarious. Because I didn't understand how this game turned into a draw when white was completely crushing. As you see earlier, like my position was horrible. My opponent started trying very hard to find a win, but it's too late, right? Like start spending like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes trying to find a win, but she could have done that earlier. But yeah, so I actually took a little bit of time taking the bishop, just making sure that there are no tactics besides perpetuals. So here's what I saw: king g7, and then king takes g2, and then queen takes b7 check, king f2, h5. Everything is pretty much a draw. Queen f6, king g8, queen d8, king g7, knight c3. This is probably like the last attempt to go for a win. So knight e7, knight b5, trying to go for knight d6. And here, I went queen d5. Now, at first glance, it seems pretty simple, right? I just want to trade queens, also sacking my knight. If white takes knight, then it's a draw because I just keep checking and the king doesn't actually have any escape square. But the problem here is that, in fact, queen takes c5 is completely winning for white now, because after knight takes c5, knight d6, this is a winning endgame for white. And the reason is, I think it's mainly due to my backward pawns, making my king more restricted, where the king can kind of just take time to move in. Like here, if I play f6, you can see that I starting to have 3 weaknesses on g6, e6, and b6. So I don't really know what to do here. And in fact, white doesn't even have to react to this, because taking take is just, I don't have any good ways to get to here fast enough. So knight d6, like, I look at the engine, and here's kind of a line. King f8, a4, king e7, king e2, f6, knight c8, king f7, e takes, king takes. And the path for the white king is very straightforward. And the thing is, white will have time to promote first, as this pawn structure is a little tough for me to play. It still requires technique, and sure, like white can blunder at any point, but I was really surprised when I saw that it was for me. But anyways, after queen takes e5, she was like, she couldn't see a win, so she's just. And here there are 2 reasons this is a draw. So queen d2, king f3, and here queen d3, king f2. And here, if I want to keep playing, I could just take the knight, and this is a completely drawn queen endgame. Like, if I could just take this, right, and then white can go for perpetual herself. Like here, just here, like it doesn't matter. I have to protect it anyway. Or here, just queen e7, whatever. And then king g7. But I just keep going for checks, because there's nothing that white can do here. So, right? So just repeat. Here, if king g2, this is what I need to calculate to make sure that this is actually a perpetual. Queen e2, king h3, then I have queen h4, right? King e2 and queen e2. It's still perpetual. So king f2, queen d2, and here we agreed to a draw, because I claimed the draw because it's a 3-4 repetition. I think overall this is probably a good tournament, and I realized that one of the biggest things that I saw now was my tactics and my endgames. My tactics have always not been good, and I'm still practicing every day. However, I am way worse at endgames than I thought. It is also true that I only learned basic endgames, and I learned mostly from grinding endgames over the board. Like, I only know like basic theoretical endgames with king and pawns and all that stuff. This tournament, I had like I literally have 3 queen endgames, which is nuts because queen endgames is probably the hardest thing I could ever do. So I don't know, like yeah, and uh, I mean queen endgames honestly are really hard, and I don't look at it a lot. But maybe I'll start looking at it more. Maybe I'll look at some books that talks about queen endgames. So that concludes my analysis for this tournament. I hope that it has been helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.